Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today I am excited to delve into the dynamic world of politics, community advocacy, and visionary leadership with a true force in Baltimore's 45th District, drawing upon deep connections to the community and a relentless pursuit for positive change. His work uniquely blends the intricate realities of the community to create impactful policies. Please welcome Senator Cory McCray. Welcome to the podcast.
Rob, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming on, making the time. And, you know, I'm glad we were able to follow up from when we met a few weeks back. And now it's just like the interview now, the actual conversation. And before we get into the larger topics, right, of this conversation, let me give you the space to introduce yourself and your background. And one of the reasons I like to do that is I find there's a lot of power and strength in that, where you know, I can say this and then it might leave out something that's very important for you or very important in your story. So I want to give you that space.
Yeah, no, first, like I said, thanks for the opportunity. What I'll do is I'll give you the elevator speech, to be honest with you. And that way, as we digging into the questions, you can pull out as much or as less as possible. But I'm born and raised in the city of Baltimore. I graduated from Fairmont Harford, right there on Harford and 25th. It was an alternative school. So folks that grew up in Baltimore know, like, we called it the Toot. I went through the same challenges that a lot of young men, young women grow up in the city have. I always tell folks, by the grace of God, I had a mom that didn't give up on her son, Rob. And my mom actually helped me find the apprenticeship program that I went through. So I'm an electrician by trade out of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I'm also an entrepreneur. I've been buying houses up and down Bel Air Road since I was 20 years of age. I tell folks that I was not familiar with the political space. I didn't start voting until I was in my late 20s. My attitude towards politics was they leave me alone, I leave them alone. So I didn't understand that politics is intertwined in everything that we do, whether it's education, higher education, our roads, whether you got trees in your neighborhood, everything that we do. I got my training wheels in the Maryland House of Delegates. So I did 4 years over there. We had a ball. We worked on things such as voting rights, restoring voting rights to over 40,000 Marylanders that were on parole or probation. And I say that, and I can dig into it, but I'm going to just gloss over a little bit. You know, that's folks that's like concentrated in the communities that I represent. So we're taking away that buying power, that voting power, that strength that was in our communities from that standpoint. Went and ran for the Maryland State Senate, one of the greatest honors, privileges, humble, but it wasn't easy. Let me be clear, because we challenged a sitting incumbent at the time. As soon as we got in the Maryland State Senate, we worked on things such as minimum wage. The minimum wage will increase to $15 an hour. I'm thankful for my Governor Westmore. Not only did he appreciate that, but he accelerated it. So it's going to actually trigger in January. But when I was in the Maryland State Senate, it went from 1010 to 11 to 1175 and so on and so on. And now this January will trigger to hit $15 an hour. We worked on transportation. Our public transportation system is underwhelming, and just making sure that we can inject over $2 billion over a 6-year period into making sure that our transportation is safe, reliable, not breaking down. And when I say that, I'm talking about our bus system, our MARC train, our light rail, our subway, and things of that nature. We worked on lead and drinking water. We worked on SNAP benefits. I've had a ball since I've been in there, Rob. I'm not going to toot my own horn, but as you dig into these questions, I'm going to dig into some of these solutions that we put forward. But I'm really, really enjoying it. And last and not least, but I would be remiss if I did not mention that I live in Overly. I live in Overly with my wife, Demetria, who I've known since we were 17 years of age, and we're living there with our 4 kids, Kennedy, Reagan, CJ, and Bryce, and the most important thing that I have going on in my life.
That is wonderful, and thank you. Even electrifying to put a little bit of humor on there. I like that. And I definitely want to key in on a few things, sort of the A and B to that initial question. You know, what was it like growing up here? Because we all have our different things, like in doing sort of this podcast, right? I think it's an export to give people like a real POV of what happens and what people's stories coming from here are. And I've heard from people like, you don't seem like you're from Baltimore. I was like, Lafayette Projects, Morgan State. What else do I need to say? City College. What do we got?
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
Right.
what was it like growing up for you?
My mom grew up in lived in the village, so we lived in Seminole Apartments. My elementary was in Rockno Heights, so like I had a great elementary school period. And I look at people like Kurt Smoke, president of UB, but at the time when I was coming up, he was the mayor of the city of Baltimore and doing things like the city that reads. He had such a strong presence in my school. And like when you see me in schools, that's the same type of behavior or same type of model that I'm trying my best to emulate, because that's what I saw growing up in the city. Unfortunately, Rob, my turn took when I got in middle school. So I went to Rockland, I went to Chicopin, I went to Winston. And I think a lot of our young folks are so great. Like they have so much potential. And unfortunately, sometimes that potential isn't being matched by the resources at that moment. And then they find different ways to act out because they may not understand how great they are or how to meet those challenges that they have in front of them. I went to Emerson for 4 months. I went to Northern for 2 years, and I'm just glad because I came out of Fairmont Harford Institute from that standpoint. And I was at a real crossroad at that time. And like I said, my mom, because she was tired of her son in and out of the juvenile justice system, sometimes in and out of the adult system, and not really finding a stable school from that standpoint, she just was like, Cory, you got to figure this out. And she reached out to the Maryland Department of Labor, Rob. She called herself. She said, send me every apprenticeship program in the state of Maryland. They send her a booklet, and she said, Cory, go fill out these applications. And by the grace of God, what happens is it takes me out of that 4x4 radius that I know, and it puts me into a broader surrounding because now I'm working around journeymen that have rental property, that have corner stores, that have liquor stores. They're entrepreneurs themselves, or just a journeyman electrician, and it gives me something else to work with from that standpoint. And that just brought, and I looked at from buying houses, I just bumped into it by accident, Rob. I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to make a couple $100. And what happens is I didn't know that homes appreciate. I didn't know the tax shelter and the benefits that come with that. And those are the things that you start to learn on your own. And I want to also lift up my grandmother, because when my mom would get sick and tired of me, she would put me out the house and I had to go live with my grandmother. Grandmother gets sick and tired of me over in East Baltimore. She put me out the house, go move back with your mother. So I bounced back and forth. And that's why you'll see some of the schools I went to was in East Baltimore, some of it was in West Baltimore, because just looking for that stability and trying to make sure that that potential gets matched. And I lean into my story, but like when you see me putting in that work, it's because I know that our young people are great. I know that our young people need to see people that look like us to know that what their potential is. I know how great our communities can be, and I know what it's given to me. And that's the reason why I'm here in this position at this moment and at this time that I'm blessed to be in.
That's great. And like indirectly, that's how we met, in one of those sort of situations where I'm kind of like, this is something I want to do. I want to be able to show and give and whatever of, hey, I'm a Black guy that does a podcast. I want to help out, these high school students and really help them kind of realize that. And I was like, oh, you guys are interviewing a senator? I've never done that. Let me help you guys out. Let me really help you guys out with this. And one of the things you mentioned, Chicopin and that area. My mom lives in that area, Govins, all of that. So, lived there for about 20 years. So definitely familiar with that area.
Now, if I could just stop and just salute you too, Rob, like whenever young folks ask me to do anything, I stop what I'm doing, because like that moment that you can press upon them is so important, and they'll remember that. And you helping them navigate them dope young scholars, dope young sisters that go to Poly City, the design schools within the city of Baltimore, and just lifting them up. I listened to the podcast. I was just like, man, I just appreciate just connecting with you all. But most importantly, like your leadership in that equation was so important, because that's what our young scholars need.
Thank you. And no, that's huge. And it means a lot, because, it was one of those things where it's just like, what are we going to do? And you don't know if anybody really cares, but being in there in those sessions with the team, those young sisters, and really being able to speak with them and have them like take an interest in what you do and say, oh, thank you for coming back. Just something as simple as like gratitude of like, you're taking your time and you're investing it here. it's just a great moment, a great part of this summer, something that I want to continue with.
And two of us, that was just a couple weeks ago. Let me be clear. Two of the young scholars, we've already connected and went to the game together. So
Nice.
like we'd have been to the Orioles. So like that's the thing is like once you get them, you got to hold on to them because they were smart, they were sharp, and I'm like I'm gonna be working for you one day. Type of, like I already knew like it was just a great honor. It was a privilege.
So I want to shift gears a little bit to the political journey and like leading to Baltimore's 45th district, the 45, right?
District 45.
So what was that, if there was any particular moment, that sort of like aha moment, if you will, of you got to get involved, you have to get involved and dedicate the time and the energy for it. Like, there's definitely a through line for this. This podcast. I'd already been a podcaster for 10 years, and a person that matches a certain color that used to run this country said something about Baltimore, and I got activated. That's the through line that led to it. I was like, no, we can speak for ourselves. And that's really been the genesis. So that's the aha moment for me.
The aha moment takes place. I'm buying houses. A bulk of them are in a community called Bel Air Edison. The leader at that moment in that town was a gentleman by the name of Tony Dawson. And I looked, he was surrounded by a whole bunch of women, Rob. So like women were activated in Tony. And like the question that he was asking me, like, look, you taking all this money out the hood. Like, what are you doing to get back? And like, I just wasn't even cognizant that community associations exist. That's how numb or oblivious that I was to the situation. But once you see people putting their time, their effort to building a larger scope of something, that's where you say, like, I gotta be involved. So I sat on Bel Air Edison's Community Association board. I sat on Benny's executive board, and I was super active within that space. And you realize some of the things that's not taking place, whether it's groceries, whether it's transportation, whether it's the roads, whether it's fresh food, whatever it is. And then you start to say, well, why is it like that? And I realized how large and critical of a role politics played into it. Rob, I try my best to get behind good people to run for office. Nobody wants to put themselves forward. So you're like, look, you go forward, I support you. And we see where we play out. And then I realized, like, in Baltimore, you had like an East Side crew and a West Side crew, and young folks just couldn't cut through. Like, if you didn't get anointed or like you weren't aligned with this group. So we ended up just saying, like, look, we're going to like roughshot and just run on our own. So in the House of Delegates, it was 3 people that were elected to there, and we came in third. We didn't run on any tickets. We didn't team up with anybody. It was just a couple hundred young folks that were inspired and engaged and said, we're going to make a change. And that's why I feel such a level of commitment, because I'm like, ain't nobody put me here but the people. Like, these folks putting up $5, $10. I can remember some of the notes or letters that I would get from some of my neighbors where they were like, look, I'm sending you this check for $5. I'm like, it's cost a lot to mail it and the check itself. But like, they would send notes with $5, a prayer, a scripture, and just say, I believe in you, baby. Like they look at me like their grandson and their son, which I believe that's why that responsibility weighs so heavy, because these folks are counting on you from that standpoint. And the other piece was, like, I feel like I was blessed. I want to say around 25, Rob, I'd owned about 7 properties in a duplex. And I'm like, look, escaping what we were able to overcome, I'm blessed. And the question is, like, I've always, you seek out money because that's what the commercials, that's what the radio, everything pushes on you to say, like, money's so important. But the question that I started to ask myself is, like, I've got to cross the finish line. How can I bust this thing wide open and get more people across this finish line with me? And like, I think that you do that, whether it's generational wealth, and I think that policy has a strong component in this piece.
Yeah. Thank you. When I have these conversations with folks, and whenever the conversation starts shifting towards money or something like that, I'm like, let me stop you right there. It's like, I don't really care about it. I care about what it can do. Like, obviously, this is not a free project. This is the microphone, the internet connection, whatever, right? And Zoom is expensive, but it is one of those things where it's like this kind of moves the needle. So the money is the vehicle in which to do this. And if this has any impact, that's what the money does. It's not like, oh, I can do that to buy more steak dinners or what have you.
Yep.
And that's sort of the value, and it means something. And I'll say, and it kind of relates to one of the things you had mentioned about getting those checks. When folks see me in the streets, I'm a very noticeable individual, and folks see me in the streets and they're like, yo, Rob, good episode, or man, appreciate what you're doing, bro. That it feels something. I feel like responsibility is like, I would describe this podcast, especially when it comes to the interviews here, as, it's community service in many regards. And it's just like, I gotta, show my folks, the people here that are doing good stuff. And I take that as a responsibility of to try to do things that are meaningful and show them in a positive light, I suppose. So shifting to this sort of point where, I would imagine like there are some days where it's like, yo, this was a wild day. We were not able to move this along. I got yelled at on the phone. I got all types. I got a nasty gram.
Yeah.
What keeps you inspired, especially when those moments of progress are slow or particularly challenging? Like, it's got to be a well sometimes. So what keeps you inspired?
Man, I'm a big protector of my energy. That's very important to me. I'm mindful of the people that I'm around, and I read a good bit. So it's certain things that I need in order to be efficient, effective, and productive. But you're right. When you put yourself into a space that's so toxic, where most of the calls you're getting is problems. So you have to be this awesome problem solver or figuring out the problem piece of it. So especially as the senator, when I looked at the Senate role, my job is to figure out how to set a strong foundation, especially for communities that do not have a plan. Nobody has direction for what direction that community is supposed to go into. So setting a solid plan is important. Figuring out how to get short-term wins, because people are apathetic. People don't believe in the system, and they don't see how the system is responding to them or works for them. So how do I also hand short-term victories while we're working on these long-term methods from that piece of it? And these are large puzzles to put together. I try my best to be mindful of what energy I'm putting out, because if I'm not in the right space, or if I don't believe in it, as a leader of the city of Baltimore, it's going to fall apart. So I have to believe that there is some light at the end of the tunnel from that standpoint. Also, just clearing a clear message about what is it that we're doing and how are we going to get there. But the question that you asked me, what gives me motivation? Young people definitely give me motivation. A lot of times I'll get cards in the mail that basically say hey, just thank you. Tamika just sent me something where we would send us a birthday notice. They were thank you for just recognizing from that standpoint. So it's these little types of things that give you the motivation, and knowing that there's more people out there rooting for you, supporting you, than the 10% that's trying to beat you down every day. And Rob, I'll be honest, I try my best to be on offense as much as possible. I'm trying to put points on the board and move the needle. But like you said, there are moments that somebody trying to put you on defense, and you got to quickly go on defense, address the issue, and get back on offense from that standpoint. So my productivity and these young folks are just giving me the motivation that I need to move each and every day in a good space and know that I'm doing good work.
That's great. And, something that I think a lot of folks, because, this podcast, and we talked a little bit before we got started, it's this intersection, arts, culture, and community. And I think that piece right there, that sort of mindset is helpful. I would imagine, for an artist, and I apply for grants and opportunities and such, you might get hit no, this is not going to work, or I wasn't feeling that episode, or didn't get the response I was hoping for. And, you just feel all right, I'm going to do something different. And it's moving you away from moving to the next thing, getting that next interview booked, recording that next interview. And you feel almost a bit shy or gun shy when it comes to, should I ask this question? Is this dumb? And you start losing yourself in that. And it's important to kind of stay in your lane, and protecting your energy is so important, because, I watch What We Do in the Shadows, and there are energy vampires, floated around.
That's a good way to put it. Energy.
So I want to, this is sort of a two-parter. Yep. I'll start with the first one. So, share with us your vision and your top priorities here. That's, I think, a big part. I see this this change that's been happening. And there are some parts that are really cool, and there are some parts that I'm like, all right, we'll see what happens with that. And so what is your vision? What are your thoughts on like sort of Baltimore, its future, your priorities, things of the like?
Yeah, so that's super important. So I've got these long-term and short-term goals, and I think it's important for folks to understand, like, what is my district? So let me lay that piece of it out first. Northern boundary is Northern Parkway. Southern is like Station North, Hopkins, Elmwood Park. East is Pulaski Highway, and west is like Harford Road, but like it goes up to Hillen and Belvedere from that standpoint. So like my long-term vision is where you can have communities that are walkable, safe, and providing a great education for our young folks. And and like, how do we grow our population is the metrics that I'm using from that standpoint. So like when I look at the Harford Road corridor and the Bel Air Road corridor, I'm working with organizations such as Harford Road Main Streets, Daniel Doty, Sam Polikoff. And then when I look at Bel Air Road, I'm working with organizations such as Benny to kind of boost those main streets and make sure that they're viable and suitable to be there. Are they where they need to be at? Harford Road is moving in the right direction. They got a bookstore, coffee store, some different sit-down restaurants, a co-working space, and then Bel Air Road, we're working immensely on that piece of it. And when I say immensely, I would just want to speak to and lift up some of the stuff that we're doing. 4x4 has 700 plus homes, and I should have said 4x4 is 4 streets in off the Bel Air Road corridor. It's Ravenwood, Elmore, Emily, and Lindale. 700 plus homes on those 4 streets. 200 plus of them are vacant, which is just horrendous in itself. So what we've done since 2019 is we brought in 3 nonprofit partners, Northeast Housing Initiative, which is a land trust. We brought in St. Ambrose, and we brought in Habitat for Humanity to help us to create home ownership and decrease the vacancy within that footprint. They did not have a plan. We had to create one from that standpoint. And I'm going to go Southern. So as I'm naming out the communities, I'm going to start going Southern from that standpoint. Morgan just purchased the Lake Clifton campus, which is a great piece of it. We actually put $5 million to make sure that they can have the demo and the design work to be able to help the communities that's adjacent to them. That's going to indirectly lift them up. South Clifton Park, 4x4, Darley Park, and Chum from that standpoint. We just picked up Chum from that piece. So I had to go get briefed from all these agencies about what we're doing in Chum. But looking at the Tivoli project, make sure that get off the ground, because that has been a hole in the ground since SRB was the mayor. And I couldn't understand why it hadn't moved in the space that it moved up. Phase 1 is fully funded. They're going to move on it. And my responsibility is figuring out phase 2 from a funding standpoint, things of that nature. When I talk about small victories, Rob, here's what we did. Yeah. Because Tivoli is like inside the Harford Road corridor, Chum, which is the neighborhood association, Mark, and they partnered with Getco, with Nicole Battle, to be able to work on a couple of the houses, and they're huge on Harford Road. And we gave them a couple $100,000 in the state budget to make sure that they had some ability from an acquisition standpoint and from renovation standpoint. So they'll be able to address the main ones on the Harford Road corridor while they're also working on that phase 1 piece of it. I've been working with Department of Housing and Community Development and picked 4 neighborhoods: Darley Park, South Clifton Park, Berea, and the 4x4. All of these communities are the ones that do not have a master plan or things of that nature. We've been identifying city-owned homes and homes that the city can acquire very quickly through the MRIM process to be able to get them in good development, create home ownership in these spaces. So that's Darley Park from that standpoint. As I go further down, East Baltimore Development, Inc., it's been going on for like the last 20 some plus years. It's a large footprint, one of the biggest developments, 40 some plus acres from that standpoint, where they've been doing some housing, they've been doing things of that nature. If you move to the west of us, it's southwest of the 45th, you got a phenomenal group called Rebuild Metro, and the work that they're doing in Oliver, Greenmount West, and Johnson Square is phenomenal. Probably some of the best this community development that's going on. So my job is when they come up with concepts and ideas, I get out their way. I make sure that they have the funding that's necessary, because what they've done over a period of time is increase home ownership. They've also increased green space with Henrietta Lacks Park, the partnership that they have with St. Francis, and a lot of these different pocket parks that they going on. They double down on education. So they've been partnering with places like Johnson Square Elementary, St. Francis, and things of that nature. They're bringing a library to East Baltimore. So you'll see right there on that Middle Street concept that they partnered with Heidi Daniel and the library system to have a space for the library to be in East Baltimore from that piece. Some of the things that we've recently did on the 400 block of Middle Street, they've knocked down those houses. So you'll see that it's empty land, but they have a concept where they want to do communal teacher spaces. So like how you have dorms, they want to create a space where teachers can live and share the kitchen, the things of that nature, but live in a space that's cost efficient and create that type of community right there. So I love that. And that's dope from that standpoint. And I also want to say, like, they're also distinguishing these liquor, like we are concentrated with liquor licenses. So they're buying the liquor stores and then getting rid of the license so that we can have a productive and conducive space for neighborhoods from that standpoint. Then as I go even more southern, I have the PSO footprint, like Perkins, Somerset, and Old Town. In Somerset and Old Town, I work with some awesome developers, Danny and Dana Henson, with Henson Development. And that's where we're going to bring the first supermarket that we've seen in East Baltimore in decades from that standpoint. So we were able to create the Somerset Grocery Store Initiative, where we were able to give funding from the state budget over $1.3 million from that standpoint to make sure that we can lure in a supermarket. We've been able to secure it. The letter of intent has been secured, and we know that we have a supermarket that's coming to that footprint. They put 2 housing developments online where they're growing our population. They also have a green space that's coming it's going to be called the Nathaniel J. McFadden Learn and Play Park. So it's like a $6 million park that's coming into that footprint, and I'm super excited about that. But those are some of the things when you talk about like what's your vision, and there's some things that I'm leaving out. I'm going to make sure I'll leave this one out. The Great Blacks and Wax Museum, like that's an anchor institution. That institution has been at that intersection as long as I've been living. So you'll see every year in the budget we made sure that that institution is protected, and the work that Dr. Martin is doing there, that it continues to stay an important, vital space in the 45th legislative district. As we dig into the questions, I'll start speaking to other stuff. I just don't want to go on and on and on too much.
No. That was so dope. But actually, you kind of eliminated, I saw it disappear from my page, eliminated one of my questions I was going to ask about the whole market situation. Because, as you were breaking down, like, originally from West Baltimore, but most of my life has been East Baltimore. And in fact, I lived over here in the sort of like Eager Street, all of that stuff. And I bought a house back over here. It was the first purchase that I made. It was like, I'm going to get a house back in my old neighborhood. I was like, this feels important to do. And, definitely was invested in this idea of, and kind of shaking some of the trees, if you will, when it came down to, this is a food desert, and really calling that out and, holding a place to the fire in a sense of, painting a narrative, right? I do this for a living. And I'm like, how do you have the nursing school, hospital, school of medicine, all of that stuff, and then there's in the middle of a food desert?
Yep.
And it was like, well, that's interesting. I was like, no. I know it's interesting. That's why I said it. And it's a thing of trying to cause trouble, but also having people just think about it. And it's one of those things that it kind of attaches to this next question of, it might not make the most sense fiscally at a point because folks are tout out. So many people don't live in this footprint or whatever it is. But is it good for the people that do? What are more people that do? And so when you're going through the process of crafting policy or working on policy, that might not just be good, but how do you distinguish what's good, what's great, what makes sense? Talk about that in terms of those priorities from policy.
Yep, I'm gonna dig back into the food piece of it, and I'm gonna answer your question. So I'm very intentional about what I assign my name to. So I don't sponsor everything, and I don't co-sponsor everything. So when folks will see, you'll see like Cory sponsor things that's very intentional, and I'm trying to look at how does this directly impact the 45th legislative district and give us a competitive edge in comparison to these other jurisdictions from that. So those are the types of things that you'll see us in. And then when we talk about food, so I was nipping at it. I was like cutting at its legs when we did SNAP benefits. When our young folks go to school, sometimes, unfortunately, we got to be honest, that may be the only meal that they receive. Like that may be the only meal that they receive. So what we did with the SNAP benefits during the summer months and during that long extended vacation in December from Christmas to New Year's, we added extra $30 on the SNAP cards and an extra $10 that long extended month. So that was like that was just cutting at food insecurity. Then we looked at transportation and we said, well, how about we make sure that when we're identifying transportation that it's accessible and we can get them to supermarkets from that standpoint. But I'm like you, Rob. I'm like, we know the problem. We know the issue. Let's put solutions right there. Why are they not? What is prohibiting them from moving? So you'll hear things such as the economics. So the money ain't there. You'll hear things such as the population ain't there. You'll hear even sometimes where they need two thoroughfares where it's coming and going from that standpoint. So the space, the land piece of it isn't always there. And it's like, all right, now that we've identified like what are the structural barriers from you getting here, let's figure out how do we create that. So when you think about like where are we going to increase population, that PSO footprint, where they're putting buildings online rapidly. Like they've got another one that's about to break ground. Then when you start thinking about the economics, like as you're increasing that population, you're also increasing the bodies, which then increase that the amount of food that's going in that cart from that standpoint. And then at the end of the day, like we give subsidies to everybody. They went over there at Port Covington and we gave about $600 million worth of subsidies. So why can't we give the same level of subsidy in our neighborhoods to make sure that we can have a reputable grocer in our spaces? So when they asked the question, I was like, Dana, like as y'all putting together y'all marketing plan, what is it that you need? And she said, we needed $1 million subsidy. I said, say no more. I'm going to go talk to Senator Ferguson. I'm going to talk to the folks, the governor at the time, and we're going to figure that piece of it out. We gave them 1.3 thus far. And you got to remember, like, as we're doing this indirectly impacts things such as Latrobe. So you got Latrobe Homes that's right there adjacent, and they're going to be able to indirectly benefit. Johnson Square is going to be, because this is going to be walking distance in reference to the footprint of that piece of it. So like those are the things, those are the complex things. Not tell me 1,000 reasons why we can't do it. What are the barriers? What is it there? And what are the tools that we can put in place to make sure that we can move the needle?
That's a really good point. You know, in even within the sort of footprint, even Station North, this podcast has a very strong relationship with. This podcast was born there and big in Station North on Charles Street, right? And you know, some of my greatest successes as a creative have taken place there, and I get a lot of energy from that area creatively. And you know, I've been involved in some conversations around like how do we revitalize this area because of some folks that might have a little bit too much property. I don't know. That's me saying that.
No, you're right.
And, you know, sort of this thing is I think about, I'm a problem solver, data analyst, right? And it's sort of the problem solver conversation. And I look at it the same way that I look in this neighborhood when it comes to the market, to that neighborhood when it comes to this sort of weird relationship with the artist community there. And my thing is, if we're drawing people here, you know, you have a train station there in Station North. You have what 83. You have it's a focal point. It can bring in a lot of attention. And you know, how do you keep it sticky? You know, my thing is, and I've mentioned this on more than one occasion to folks, if you're going to those, you know, 2, 3, maybe even 4 great restaurants in that area, you should be going to a show right afterwards. Make it sticky. You know, dinner and a show. If you're going to Alma or you're going to Forage, you should be going to Big. You should be going to Motor House. That's what it is. And the same thing when it comes to, you know, the market in this area. You know, there are certain things, I'm bougie. There are certain things that I enjoy that I'll go to the Wegmans for. But for the most part, if I need to get like, you know, ginger or some salad or whatever the thing is, I want to be able to go there to something that's in this footprint. And I think a lot of people would do the same thing as you're talking about with the sort of adjacent communities that could be popping in, and that's bringing in folks to be sticky. What else is over here? That's sort of the thinking that goes with it. But when you don't have sort of those anchor places, or the closest ones is maybe over there where the Target is at, and Fells Point,
Canton.
Then, or even Harbor East, I've gone there to the Whole Foods to get stuff. So I'm not stopping there. I'm going to get coffee at a place. I'm going to do this. So I'm making several transactions in this area because that's where the anchor is at.
Yep. No, that's so important. Like, we need the anchors, and I think we need to build off of our strengths. When I look at the Station North footprint, like, we have UB, we have Micah, we have Hopkins, like, we have the anchors there, and just figuring out how do we partner with them to put these large complexes together. I'm proud of the work when you said the Motor House. I think about OpenWorks also as another footprint from that standpoint. And I also think we have to be intentional about the dollar. So, like, when we think of Kevin over at Snack by Nancy, when I think about Terrence over at Terrace Cafe, or Taste This, the young brothers Dante and Craig, like, super intentional about, like, how do we spend that money, and how do we keep it local? Like, when you was walking up the street, you saw me at the Guilford Brewery, and just figuring out, like, how do we partner with these are great places that we need to keep lifting up. And so many people, I think we brought 200 people to the Guilford Brewery that night. And, like, so many people I said they had never been there, didn't know it exists. And I'm like, look, we need to keep doing this from that sample. Lift Baltimore in so many ways.
And it's funny, like, I, was part of a going away party there, one of the first sort of like private events that they had there, because I was on it early. And when we saw each other that day, I was coming from a economic development meeting for Station North. I was invited, representing sort of the art scene, I suppose. But in it, I was the only Black person and only male that was being representative in that group. And I was like, I don't know if I'm qualified for this, but I had
a lot of pressure.
Literally. But I had my points. And, I was coming from the perspective of, I never left. I've always lived here, and I'm sort of adjacent to it, and I dabble and poke into the arts world, but I'm more of a person that's documenting stuff. So I have that vantage point of talking to a lot of different people in a lot of different walks of life. So that's the perspective I was presenting in that.
Now, I appreciate that, because, like, being born and raised in the city, I could be anywhere in this country, in this state, but, like, we choose Baltimore and we choose this space right here. And I think about, like, especially as you start raising a family, you start to think, like, is this the right thing? And it's like, no, like, we have to double down. If all of our leaders, if all of our contributors are moving out of our neighborhoods, what do you expect to happen in those footprints? So, like, that's the thing is like, how do we lift the things that are for us, by us, but more importantly, our home?
100%. So I got one last real question, and then I got some rapid fire questions for you.
All right. I'm scared about this rapid fire, but
nah, you good. Can't let them see you sweat. Let's take a moment in this sort of last question to kind of push the, sort of political identity to the side just a touch. And let's talk about the person. What is your identity beyond your work? And, let's talk about that a little bit as we wrap up here.
I just turned 40 back in October. And my question that I ask myself is, like, how do I add value? How do I work on self-development at least 1% each and every day? And the most important thing that I can do is be a loving father, a good husband, because while you're trying to shift the trajectory of a number of different folks, at the end of the day, you have to make sure that your kids, like, you're raising good human beings. So, like, on a day-to-day basis, my oldest she's over at Poly. She's in the Ingenuity program, but, like, she likes tennis. So, like, mine's is, how do I support her in the way that she needs to be supported, and know that she's special, she's great, and things of that nature. We're also going through SAT. So, like, she did SAT prep this summer with my second oldest, Reagan. Like, she plays AAU basketball. So I found myself in Kentucky a month and a half ago with her in tournaments, and she played with Lady Cut Nation. And, like, how do I make sure that they're developing into these great human beings. The boys are 8 and 9, so they do. It's a bunch of folks that I'll see over at the flag football with Coppermine. Like they got a fall and spring league that they run for little kids, and then basketball. They play basketball and things of that nature. So as I'm helping my kids, I know I'm indirectly helping other kids in the neighborhood. But like my most important thing that I can contribute to, Rob, is just how can I be a good father? How can I make sure that life is different than the way we come up, the way we see things, and it's just better, and we put them in spaces where they can reach this unlimited potential that they don't even know that they're capable of at that time. So like that's what I'm thinking about each and every day. Like, how do I contribute to that and contribute to their success?
That is wonderful, and thank you for that. And it's a nice segue to these rapid fire questions. So all the goodwill that's been created.
All right, I'm in the chair. You got me.
So, as I tell everyone, don't overthink these questions. They're all just right. Whatever it is at the moment.
Yep.
Could you tell us 2 or 3 of your favorite places in Baltimore? You're not ranking them, but places that you dig. It could be a restaurant, it could be a park, things of that nature.
Yep. I definitely say Coco's because my wife make me run out there every couple of weeks to go get crab cakes. And I did Terrace Cafe 3 times this week. But like with Terrace Cafe, it's the vibe, the food is seasoned well, but it's also the art. Mm-hmm. If you look and pay attention to what Terrence has on those walls, and I got into like the arts space probably I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. Like I really just got deep into, especially when people love their craft. So like definitely say Terrace Cafe. And then what would be the third one? I guess you could say either the baseball or football stadium at this moment. Like both teams are going to do great. So like, but like that's it's fun. Usually that's one of the things that can bring us together collectively, no matter what age you are, ethnicity, gender. Like people love and go and throw for the Ravens or the Orioles at this point.
It's great. Since you mentioned, developing this love and appreciation for art, I got to ask you an art related question. What is your favorite color?
Blue.
Okay. You see the background right in this. That was mine for a very long time.
That was a given. Like if you see me most of the time, if I got a suit on, it's a blue suit. Like I try not to put much thought into that, so you'll see blue like in things that I wear.
Okay, you're going to love this next question then. What is your favorite suit accessory? Because every time I see you, you've been in a suit or something in that vein, as one would be. And what is your favorite suit accessory? I know some people like the tie pin. Some people, my attaché is an accessory. But what is your favorite suit accessory?
I definitely I wear the things that keep your shirt tucked in. I just can't think of the name. Of them. I like your shirt to be like going the right direction, looking from that piece of it. But it's like the things that you keep your shirts tucked in your pants with.
That's good. Yeah. I used to, going to Morgan, with the whole business program, we would always have the different suits. And, being in this business program all 4 years, when you see people wearing their suits freshman year, like, that's not good, bro. That ain't it. Then by the time you get to like senior year, you're just like, oh, okay, I see you, bro. You out here. Yeah. And some of the accessories that would come in, these pocket squares and these stock choices. Yeah. I'm like, all right, less Southern preacher, more we're going to the boardroom, So this is the next one. Is there a book that comes to mind? You mentioned you're a big reader. Is there a book that comes to mind that has shaped your approach? It doesn't necessarily have to be something that's politically inclined, but something that has, had an impact on your approach to life.
I think Reginald F. Lewis is one of the ones that we come out of Baltimore, watch a white man have all the fun. That's like a classic type of piece. And I like things like A.G. Gaston's book. I like Herman Russell's book. These are like, if I'm talking to a young man, a young woman that want to be an entrepreneur, like usually I'm pushing them to like the 20s, the 30s, like not right now, but like just when it was so complex, they could burn your store down, burn your hotel down, or things of that nature. From a political standpoint, some of the greats was Harold Washington. I love Harold Washington, the first Black mayor of Chicago's bio. Theo did They Call Me Little Willie. So I appreciate that piece of it from an entrepreneurial standpoint. I love Shirley Chisholm. It's a couple of them, and then Team of Rivals. Like I think that shows you how Lincoln had put like this awesome cabinet together that was sharper than him, and no, but he was like a phenomenal leader. So I think that's like a leadership book, but also a team building book, and understanding why it's so good from a team building. Those are some. So the spaces that I like to delve into is history, leadership, and I want to say Black wealth, but Black wealth back in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, it's definitely something about diving back to that stuff that is before it's got commodified into what it is now. Like when there's something that's current, I'm looking for the references that are in it. But I like to go back. Like I've been, a lot of art books that I have the audio books is I'm always got AirPods in or something, but definitely will go back and peep some Jack Welch stuff, or I'll check out 48 Laws of Power, or any of the Robert Greene stuff. And they pop up in conversations all the time.
They fundamentals. They like the givens. You supposed to start there too.
Absolutely. And his name is Robert. What can I say? So this is the last one, and I'm very interested in this. You mentioned a bit before we got started about some travel that you've engaged in recently. So when you're traveling to a new place, what is the first thing that you do? You've already gotten settled, already checked in, all of that good stuff. But what is the number one on the itinerary for you?
I'm thinking about the experience. So like, what was the experience? And I just did this DISC assessment, and like I'm a C personality, so I probably got it all planned out from that standpoint. But I'm trying to see like what's the local culture, what's the local vibe in that space, so that I can identify from that standpoint and get the true feeling of what it was to go to that space.
I mean, we're all about the truth here. I mean, it's obvious. But that's pretty much it for the podcast. I'm looking for coffee when I get there, by the way. But that's pretty much it for the podcast. So one, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and speaking with us and me and the listeners and all. And I want to invite and encourage you to share with the folks where they can check out what's happening, social media, website, whatever you want to share in these final moments. The floor is yours.
Yep. So just first, I just want to lean in and say, like, Rob, just thank you for who you are. Thank you for amplifying Baltimore. Thank you for amplifying our spaces and like just what you do with these young scholars in our neighborhoods. Folks can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm Senator McCray, Cory McCray. From that standpoint, I'm not the most technology, so I haven't delved into a lot of spaces, but I am on the basic spaces. And if you ever wanted to look me up from a website standpoint, it's just courymccray.com.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Senator Cory V. McCray for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community. The community is in all caps. You just got to look for it.